Welcome to Navigating Cancer Together. My name is Talaya Dendy. I'm a cancer thriver, cancer doula, independent patient advocate, and owner of On the Other Side. I use my experience to help others get on the other side of cancer. Gaps between the guidance, emotional support, and education that are needed and what one receives can be huge. This podcast fills those gaps by sharing stories, resources, and information about all things related to cancer and wellness. I interview guests from all walks of life who are living with cancer, caregivers, and those who are thriving on the other side. Also, I talk with organizations, healthcare professionals, and experts in the health and wellness spaces who offer complementary and integrative care. Join me. We are in this together. Hello, everyone. This is Talaya Dendy from On the Other Side Life, and you're listening to Navigating Cancer Together, the show that has something for everyone facing cancer. Why? Because everyone is different with different needs, beliefs, and perspectives. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode. I encourage you to open your minds and your hearts. Today, our very special guest is Heather Noggle. Heather is an almost 33-year cancer thriver, 33 years. And she's the owner of Codistac, a process solutions company that weaves technology and human experience together to guide customers to find unique answers to their most vexing problems in those areas where people and technology meet, which are typically HR, custom built software, and cybersecurity. Survivorship is one of those things that they really don't prepare you for. And Heather joins me today to share her experience with salivary gland cancer and what her life has been like after cancer. I am so excited to talk with Heather. She has a lot of great information to share. Heather, thank you so much for joining us today and welcome.
Hi, thank you. I'm honored.
Heather, 33 years. That is a blessing. That is a privilege and honor, all of those things. Please tell everyone more about your background and who you
Sure.
are.
Most of my adult life has been after the cancer experience, and so I don't really remember too much. There's a definite before and after. I was 19 years old when I was diagnosed, and so my whole childhood was before, and I didn't learn until recently that 19 is still considered pediatric cancer.
Yes.
And so I was in college when I was diagnosed, and I didn't have any pain or anything. I just had a lump that appeared in my face. And so I was home. I was on campus living, going to classes, living a normal college life. And I was home celebrating my dad's birthday. And I showed my parents this lump, and they frowned and they said, "Well, you should go get that checked out." And I didn't even have a doctor. I was so healthy.
Oh, yeah.
And so we found my mom's doctor, and she frowned at it too and sent me to a specialist. And after a series of appointments, they said, "Well, you've got a tumor." And this is 1991. So the technology they used then to say you've got a tumor was to take this giant needle, and it looked like the torture device in the Star Wars movie, the first one, A New Hope, what they call it now. To us, it was just Star Wars. And, it almost had the sound effects of bringing the needle towards your face. And they took a few samples of the thing, and it came back benign. And so it's like, okay, great. I'll go in, I'll have this easy surgery, I'll go back to life. And the surgery ended up being 6.5 hours for a giant tumor wrapped around a salivary gland. And when I came out of it, the right side of my face did not even move.
Oh,
So
wow.
then they said there's a suspicious section. And so it was a long wait of trying to determine what that all meant. And by the end, this was November 1st, 1991, I had that surgery. By the end of the surgery, by the end of November, I should say, that's when they came back and they said, yeah, that's actually cancer. So it was a mixed tumor. It's one of those rare ones, types of cancer where you can have a tumor that is both benign and malignant. And so if any part of it's malignant, they do consider it a cancer because it's malignant. And so I had to undergo treatment.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, Heather. Please share with the audience what salivary gland cancer actually is and what areas it impacts.
Sure. First off, it's rare. It's very rare. And there are three different types of salivary glands. The biggest type is called the parotid, and that's most of the water comes from your parotid salivary gland. And so as you can imagine, that means decreased saliva if you're to have one of those removed. And so decreased water in the saliva mix. It's all fairly complicated and we don't think about it because it just works.
Just happens.
It just happens and it just works. And so any of the salivary gland types can get cancer attached to it. This particular type of cancer is very slow growing until it isn't. So the tumors, I should say, are fairly common when they're almost always benign. But if a cancer does attach to it, it's very, very slow growing tumors. And some people have these tumors for years and years on end. The most famous person I know of who had one of these tumors is LeBron James. It's rumored that that was his
Wow.
type of tumor that he had removed. I don't think they confirmed it. They said it was a salivary tumor, but when I saw where it was, it's the same thing. But his
Wow.
thankfully was benign. So going through all that, the other two types, if you get them on the, I think I didn't prepare this, the sublingual or the maxlingual, those are fairly serious cancers. This one I'm very pleased to report was not that serious compared to what it could have been.
That's good. And
Yes.
thank you so much for sharing that, Heather. Congratulations on 33 years. I
Thank you.
just love hearing that. You were very young, 19. It's like you haven't even figured life out yet.
No.
I mean, you're just like, Heather, that's who I am. And,
Yeah.
that's about as much as you can say at that age, most of the time. How did that diagnosis impact you mentally and emotionally?
Oh, there are two splits on this. One is the fact this is facial surgery, so it's disfiguring. And at 19, you care about that more than, as long as you don't think you're going to die, then the cancer is almost secondary for a little while.
Mm.
And so I had to get through that. I actually had some plastic surgery a year after cancer treatment, and that helped some. But understanding I'm going to look different, I'm going to function differently, and even more than now, beauty is somewhat of an important thing. And so that was the first hurdle. And once I adjusted to this is how I'm going to look, this is who I'm going to be. And then, of course, later the plastic surgery, very helpful. Then the piece of, well, now I have to figure out, can I navigate cancer treatment and life and college courses and work and all the things? And that major decision of, okay, I'm 19 and what do I do? And I
Right.
ended up, because of when the semester was ending, I decided to take the semester off and do the treatment. That way there wouldn't be any distractions. I had scholarships that were such that I had to maintain a certain grade point average, and I didn't want that additional pressure. So I did that and then worked and tried to live as normally as I could during the treatment period. I did not require chemotherapy, so that was good news.
Yes.
Didn't figure that I had spread, but the technology at the time with the radiation means that my radiation field was just absolutely giant. So my spine was in the field, my shoulder was in the field, half of my face was in the field, and really a lot of radiation in terms of how wide it was. So that was something that'll affect later in life, whereas now I think they're much more targeted
Yes.
in how they choose to treat and the ability to do treatment. So that's been a nice advance in cancer treatment.
I've talked to a couple people, several people actually, who were diagnosed early in the 90s or late 80s, and they really talk about how different the treatment and the technology is. And because of the wide range of radiation that you had to receive, Heather, have you had any other side effects related to that?
Yes, that's the only downside. I would say I've been very healthy. I've not had a second cancer, and that's what that 5-year period is where you're waiting and you're waiting. But I've been very healthy in regard to that. The side effects are more interesting than anything. The first is from the surgery itself. When I had that gland and its tumor removed, then that left sweat gland out there and then the facial nerve, and they decided to become friends. And there's an actual
Okay.
syndrome for this called Fraser or Fry syndrome, depending on how you read it, where the facial nerve that's out there waiting to do something finds a salivary gland. And now every time I am salivating, I instead sweat on the right
Okay.
side. So that's interesting. That's easy to work with. Some people get Botox, but you have to do that every 3 months. And I've never decided to do that. Yeah, I see your face. I agree. No,
Yeah.
thank you. And then
No
I have,
judgment, but no thanks.
yeah, no thanks. I have ringing in my ear that is constant and it's fairly loud. And I don't think about it unless I'm speaking about it, talking about it, and some hearing loss in that ear. I don't know the degree to which I have it. I just know that whenever I'm speaking with someone, I tend to angle my other ear so I can hear better. And
Okay.
those are minor. The other one, though, is some neuropathy or tingling in my legs that's been there since about 2005. So that came years later, and they can't find a cause for it other than probably spine and radiation to the spine. So
Okay.
not a big deal. I don't, again, think about it because I'm fully functional. And so I have read the litany of things that can go wrong with head and neck cancer in
Mm.
terms of side effects after, and I'm doing pretty well.
Good. That is a blessing. I'm so happy to hear that. And I'm glad to know that the treatment that you had all those years ago have not impacted your life very much today. And the other thing that I want to talk about is during that time, there was no internet. You could not go on Facebook and join a group and talk about different kinds of cancer. You couldn't Google any of those things. So please share what it was like, Heather, for you in terms of a support system at that time.
Well, I had a rare cancer in a small mid-sized city where there was no support system. And as I said, at the end of the semester, and I wasn't processed to the point where I could explain what was happening or even that I was leaving the
Mhm,
college. And so I just somewhat withdrew.
mhm,
And that's very hard because if you don't understand that there are other people out there who are doing just fine after this, your mind will catastrophize, I think.
mhm.
And for a while there, it was, well, I was feeling well. I did everything I could. I went to the library and I was active and out and taking walks and doing things. But when the treatment hit about the fourth week, like a freight train, because it's all cumulative with
Yes.
radiation, you're feeling fine, and then suddenly you are not feeling fine. And then that will persist until 3 to 6 weeks after radiation before you really start to feel better. I lost my taste buds, and so I had trouble eating. And processing through all this without having someone to talk with about it of, oh, you'll start to feel better at this point in time in this frame, and this mindset will help you, and let me just talk with you 10 minutes. I think that would have been really helpful. I went to radiation one time and somebody thought I was parking the, I was somebody's grandmother or granddaughter. I was there helping my grandmother, and that was awkward until they called me back to get treatment.
Yeah.
And it just it was a difficult thing to do that I'm pleased that people have those connections now. There's a whole Facebook group called Parotid People, and it's for benign and cancer, but it's the idea that we don't have to go through this alone anymore. And I know there are great organizations like Imerman Angels where you can match with someone who's almost exactly like you as close as possible to navigate that journey together. And I think that that's one beautiful thing the internet has done for us.
I agree. There are a ton of resources out there, and you can really kind of pick and choose which direction you want to go. One thing I want to ask, Heather, is how did not having that support at that time, did that come back up later in life? Did
Yeah.
you talk with a therapist or okay.
I did need a therapist after, and it was a couple years after. And it also it made me afraid to have children. So I met my husband in the mid 90s, and all of a sudden, any sort of illness I was having, it just seemed like I didn't have them anymore. And so that was
Mm,
very nice because
yeah.
I had some
Yeah.
other things happen after cancer. It just might have been the mental issues causing some physical issues as well, which I think we've proven that we are holistic people.
That's right.
And I lost my train of thought. I apologize for that. Will
That's
you ask that
okay.
again?
Yeah, absolutely. Because you didn't have support right at that
Mhm.
time, did things show up later for you in life where
Yeah.
you had to talk with a therapist, or how did that look for you?
For a while after the treatment ends and I started to feel better, and then it felt like the emotional issues were happening after that, where who am I? What am I doing? I'm miles more mature or older than my peer group. So how do I relate to people who are 21, 22, 23 years old? And how do I even tell my story? Is anyone interested? Because it feels very much a part at that point in my life that I was Heather the cancer survivor. It's less so now. And so those first few years were a little bit tough. But I went on and I did a StoryCorps conversation, and that the first time I was able to talk about this all very positively, it was almost 8, 9 years after.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I shared the story there, and that's in their archives. So I think that's a very normal reaction, that maybe it's easier to go through it than it is immediately after when healing. And
Mm.
I don't think that's talked about. It certainly wasn't in the 90s about, you might want to prepare for this, what happens after and who you
Mhm.
are, and to have those support systems and those conversations lined up and a therapist to work through those things, because once you work through them, then life can be great.
Yeah, I agree. I really think there needs to be an oncology therapist or something like that, a person who specifically works with and supports people that have experienced cancer. I think that's so important because that's kind of a different conversation. And I think that there are key skills or key knowledge that the therapist may want to have to be able to have those really tough conversations. And I almost envision this person being another person who has survived cancer as well.
Mhm.
So if someone's out there listening, you want to be a therapist, maybe that's a good area to think about is specifically supporting cancer survivors. I thought about one thing, Heather, and I actually envision this. I can visualize what you said. When you said you were parking the car and someone thought you were parking the car for your grandmother. And I remember that feeling as well, like, everyone's looking at you like, "Oh, she can't be here getting
Mhm.
cancer treatment." And the interesting thing is that today, we are seeing more and more younger people getting cancer than ever. And so, that's a really tough dynamic too to work through is being so young and you're in, these cancer centers with other people who are much older than you.
Yeah, there's no one to talk to, really.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
the friendships you might build if you have somebody similar to you sitting next to you, then yeah, and that's the especially difficult thing about cancer, I think, is it's your own body is trying to kill you.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
any other illness, I'm not sure that's the case, especially going through the period where you don't know how serious it is. Just the diagnosis, the first diagnosis of you have cancer, then your mind will just blow that into what some dimension that it's hard to understand. I
Mhm.
don't know that
Mhm.
I hope to never find out if a second diagnosis is as hard,
I agree.
but
We don't need to find that out.
we don't need
Yeah,
to find that
we're
out.
good. We've been through enough.
Yeah, we
Yeah. Heather, please share your experience. You've been talking about, long-term survivorship. You've shared the physical challenges, the emotional and mental challenges. What helped you to move forward and move through those things, Heather? I think that's really important for the listeners.
so as many normal life experiences as possible, the things that you used to do and love that maybe you stopped during treatment, especially if they were physically intensive, like exercise, etc. Some people are able to navigate that all the way through, but I wasn't. I couldn't get enough to eat to where I could live quite as normally. But resuming those things without thinking, "Oh, I did this before cancer," it's just resuming as many normal life joys as possible and finding new ones and finding new people who don't see you as the cancer survivor. It's not as though you have to leave your friend group behind, but sometimes they won't understand you, the new you that you've had to become after all of the things you've endured. So
Yeah.
those are the things is I had a natural life experience of then I graduated from college and I went on to grad school, which is in a different city. And so suddenly I'm just Heather. And I think
Yeah.
that helped.
Absolutely. I can see where that would make a big difference because you're right. It's like throughout life, people see you as one way. And then, like you said, a new group of people see you in a different way. And who really wants to always be known as the person that had cancer? I mean, especially when you've had it at a young age, you want to experience life. And for some people, that's hard for them to
Mhm.
visualize when they're going through it. The way that your life is now, Heather, would you have imagined at 19 that your life would be what it is today?
Oh no. I have two kids. I have one of those kids is about to graduate from high school.
Nice.
And I don't know that I would have done that. I was somewhat afraid to have children with the issues as young as I was. And the children are healthy, and my life is healthy and good. And I'm
Good.
doing important things that help people. And so
Good.
I think that that's a message I would leave is when things are difficult and recovery may be difficult, there's more giving and living to do
Thank you so much for sharing that, Heather. So let's transition now to today and
today.
your career. What have you been accomplishing over the past few years, Heather? And please tell the audience what you do.
Sure. I like to help small businesses do the people part of cybersecurity so they can do the technical part of cybersecurity. That's my big, big passion right there. It's an interesting thing because if you hear that scary word cybersecurity, you really think about computers and all these whiz-bangery things. And it's a lot of it's planning and strategy like any other core business component. And so I help demystify that in my day to day. And then I do that primarily through a nonprofit. And my own company does more general business and tech. But my work with a nonprofit called the Missouri Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, and some
Nice.
volunteering I do there and some other work I do there. And that's just super exciting to me.
That's
So,
very interesting. And technology is everywhere these days. So
mhm.
there's always a need for cybersecurity. Give us an example, Heather, of some of the things that people reach out to you for support.
Okay, sure. So consider a small government that knows it needs to do better because it reads, maybe a municipality. Somebody reads in the newspaper of another municipality having problems with cybersecurity. And so we can go in there and take an assessment of where they are, what they've done right, what they need to do. And sometimes this is the really rewarding thing. There are some very small changes that can make a giant difference while we work on the things that are next in the next phase. So it's almost like if you've ever played Super Mario Brothers, where you rescue the princess from the first castle and then, oh, we learn we have another castle, there's another princess, there are more things to stomp on. It's a lot like that, but it's to do the early work and protect people. That's really very passionate. I'm very passionate about that. I don't even have the right word other than to say that.
And I can
It's
see how
rewarding. Yeah.
your face lights up. I love that. And you said do the early work. I really like that too, because,
Hmm.
once you start to have issues with cybersecurity, from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that I've heard of people who have experienced like cyber attacks, and it's really hard to figure out, where it came from or how to get rid of the virus or whatever it is that's happening. Is that pretty accurate?
If you've done the early work, you can detect an attack as it's happening. So that's one of the really key things is to have, there's something called endpoint detection and response, which is your antivirus on steroids, we call it. And so it does so much more with modern tech on some of the things we can do. And then for companies, if they're doing a lot of technical things or have a lot of connections, some companies have bigger, more employees, more computers, more things, then they have to monitor all those machines and any servers they might have. And so you can aggregate all of the data and the logs and the things that are happening and know how to watch for incidents there. Obviously, you can't do that until you know what you have and how to watch it and put things in place. And so business in the 21st century is very different than the boy, I didn't have internet to talk to anybody about my cancer. So it's been an interesting ride.
I bet. Yeah. You've experienced a lot of changes in health, healthcare, and also technology. So,
Yes.
yeah. Heather, if people are interested in learning more about the work that you do, where can they find you?
Easiest place to start, I have a website just as my name, which is heathernoggle.com. And if you have show notes, you'll have the spelling in there, so I don't have to spell all the G's out.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So that's the easiest way.
Okay. So, I will have Heather's website in the listen notes. Please feel free to reach out to her if you have any cybersecurity needs or questions. Now, Heather, let's transition back to the main topic. What is one word that you would use to describe how you have survived cancer?
I've made it a part of me, but not a whole of me. I think that It's very important to live as normally as possible and to incorporate any sort of adjustments you have to make as just how it is. So the word is resilience, I think, is what we're searching for. And so these side effects, they're just a part of me. And the cancer is just a part of me. I have funny stories that come from it. One of them is that they used to tattoo you for cancer treatment. And so, I mean, again, remember, this is my face. So I
Oh, yes,
have
yes.
I have
Yeah.
tattoos in my hairline. I had a tattoo on my neck
Oh, wow.
because that's the way they had the field. Now these are really tiny little dots and they were forest green and I got 6 of them at once. So I had some fun telling people over the years that I have 6 tattoos. And when I had the plastic surgery, one of them, the neck tattoo, got removed. So not only that, I can say I have an unintentional neck tattoo and then I unintentionally had it removed.
Mhm.
So again, it's just looking at all the things in life. There's going to be trauma that hits us. That's just how life goes. And to try and incorporate that into how we help people, I think that's a message of hope from a very, very long time cancer survivor.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Heather. Very important things for people out there listening, and they've been newly diagnosed or they're in the middle of
Mhm.
treatment and they're just wondering what's going to happen. And hope, you have to hold on to hope.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's it. And that things
Hmm.
are going to get better. They may be different, but things are going to be better than they are in the middle of treatment and right after treatment when the what next hits.
Yeah. What next? That's a heavy question.
Yeah.
Yes. What would you say to 18 or 19-year-old Heather?
Hang on. It's going to be okay. Keep your patience, learn from this, and don't let it keep you down any longer than you need to, because there's a point where that's all helpful because it's part of the healing. And then there's a point when it's not helpful at all, and to let go of it at that point. And that's
Wonderful.
a life lesson on everything, not just cancer. Give yourself a day to grieve whatever you need to grieve, and then tomorrow you need to start planning.
Great advice. Heather, is there anything else that you want to share before we wrap up today?
It is Head and Neck Cancer Month in April. That's about the other thing I would like to share. And so it is a burgundy and white ribbon that I'm not sure it gets as much press as some of the other types of cancers. So learn what you can about head and neck cancer, and that's what I have to share.
Heather, are there any head and neck cancer resources or organizations that you'd like to mention for the listeners out there?
I don't really know of any. There's the Oral Cancer Foundation, but I'm not affiliated with them. I haven't done any volunteering with them, and I don't know what their cutting edge work is. So I'll mention them, but I don't
Okay.
even have a URL I can give you without research.
Okay. I can dig that up and I'll put that in
Okay,
the listen notes as well. No
thank you.
problem. Well, thank you so much, Heather, for joining me today, for sharing your message of hope, resilience, inspiration. And I think the key message here, and please feel free to add to this if you like, is that there is definitely life after cancer.
Yes, there is. There's a lot of it if you're young. So take that to your advantage, even when it's
Won-
scary.
Wonderful. Great advice. Thank you so much, Heather, for joining me today. Now, I have a question for the audience, and I would like to know, what is one action that you can take from today's conversation that you can implement in your life? What is one thing that you can do that you learned from this conversation today that you can implement in your life? That is something to think about. So, Heather is a prime example that if you get a cancer diagnosis, and if you're really young or no matter what age you are, there is life after cancer. Hold on to hope. You never know what's around the corner. Heather, again, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to talk with you.
Thanks again.
I would like to give a shout out to the listeners. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please share, follow, or subscribe so that you can easily find this podcast and listen again. You can listen to Navigating Cancer Together on Amazon Music, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Are you looking to expand your professional network? If so, please join me on LinkedIn. As an active member of the platform, I would like to invite you to join me there. Let's grow our connections together. Search for Talaya Dendy, that's spelled Talaya Dendy. That is it for this Wednesday. And until next time, let's keep navigating cancer together. Take care. Thanks for listening to this episode of Navigating Cancer Together. I hope you found it helpful. Please be sure to subscribe, share, and tell your friends and family about it. For notes from the show and previous episodes, visit ontheotherside.life and check out the podcast section. I would love it if you join me for the next episode. Talk to you soon.